Hey guys, Lori here. And today we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics, which is actually pricing. And I know for a lot of professional organizers, when it comes to money, it is a really uncomfortable topic to have with clients. And maybe it's because I was a salesperson in my previous life, but having those conversations, maybe it's because I'm an Enneagram 8, I don't know, but having those topic discussions about money is not something that ever made me feel uncomfortable. So I know that there is a lot of anxiety and for a lot of people, and hopefully we're going to dispel some of that here. So what I wanted to do was talk about some of the common ways that people charge, because there's a lot of conversation about money, right? Like how much should I charge? And again, we've talked about this. It's so market dependent and what the scope of your services are and all of that good stuff. But how to package that, for lack of a better word, how to articulate how you charge to people is another piece of the equation. And so I want to just talk about different models and pros and cons to each and why I like the ones that I do and why I don't like the ones that I'm going to share. Now, all that being said, there is not a one size fits all. There's not a right way and a wrong way. There are just advantages and disadvantages for each of these. And I want to walk through them with you. All right. Again, before we get into it, if this is your first time watching or listening, just please click the follow, subscribe button. This is a show that's dedicated to helping you as a professional or aspiring professional organizer grow your business. So if that is you, I want you to not miss any other episodes. So make sure you click that button and you'll have them automatically in your feed. Okay. That being said, let's talk about pricing. Number one, the most common way that most professional organizers or many professional organizers, especially when they're starting out, charge is charging by the hour. So again, it's pretty cut and dry. We'll talk a little about pros and cons of each of that. So pros and cons of charging by the hour. It's very clear to explain. This is what I charge. I charge $100 an hour. And people know I was there for 5 hours, they pay $500. You're there for 8 hours, you pay $800. Now, what I don't like about the charging by the hour, especially when it comes to professional organizing, is where and when do you start and stop the clock? So there's a few things. First of all, a lot of the work that we do as professional organizers are done behind the scenes. They are done in the research, in the prep, in the what happens when we leave the clients as we go to drop off donations or do returns or whatever it is. And so knowing that you're charging by the hour, most people are associating that hourly pricing with the time that you're on site with the client, not any of the planning beforehand or the post work after you leave. And if you are going to charge by the hour, you need to factor in, I should say, how are you accounting for those invisible hours that the client doesn't see? Are you charging a flat shopping fee? Are you eating that as part of your just absorbing it, which is not a long-term good business strategy, because eventually if you're going to expand your team and hire other people, they're not going to want to do it for free. They're going to expect to be compensated for that. So those are things to think about. Another kind of negative con for charging by the hour is if you are going to do this more of an a la carte type pricing, is it can almost appear as very like nickel and diming the client. So you're charging $100 an hour, but then there's an added charge for this and an added charge for shopping, and added charge for donation removal, and added charge for this. And so they never truly know what the price is. And I think from an optics perspective, from the client side, that can be a little off-putting. I don't like that. I know for myself as a client on the client side, if I'm hiring somebody to do something and I ask them for a price, I want to know so I can budget accordingly. Now, the advantage to that hourly pricing for you as the professional organizer is you don't have to commit in advance. You don't have to estimate how long the project's going to take. You're just like, I'm going to go along. You can estimate, but you aren't committing to saying, you're like, I'm going to work, I'm going to get paid. And if I work 5 hours, great. If I work 10 hours, great. And it just grows along with you, but you don't have to worry about, okay, I know I have a deadline to get this done. Another reason why I'm not a fan of the hourly pricing is the fact that it just, again, I think for the client, it gives them pause to wanting to add things on, or for them to start to feel pressure to make decisions quickly because they know that the clock is ticking. And when it comes to professional organizing and the work that we do, especially on the decluttering side, but I would say even as you're designing and organizing, for me, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. And I don't ever want a client to think that, coaxing the clock. And I don't want a client, if I ever stopping to ponder or stopping to have a conversation, that the clock is ticking. And I don't ever want a client to think that they have to move quicker to make decisions because they're going to be punished by having to pay more money if they need to process the emotions of getting rid of their stuff. So I think there's a lot of unspoken negatives, in my opinion, to hourly pricing. But I understand, especially when people are starting out and you don't have the confidence to necessarily project how long you think a project's going to take. It's a lot easier and safer to just say, this is my hourly rate. So that's hourly pricing. Okay. Next up is what I am absolutely not a fan of. And this is extremely controversial, but it is what is known as package pricing, right? Which is a bundle discount. So in a nutshell, what that means is you are selling multiple tiers of services that usually are bigger blocks of time. And the incentive is for the client, the larger block of time you purchase, the less you pay. So for example, you say, okay, you could book a 5-hour package for $100, or you could book a 10-hour package for $800. So you have now all of a sudden you've reduced your hourly rate from $100 an hour to $80 an hour. And then you could say, or you could do a 15-hour package for $1,200. And now all of a sudden you're working for $60 an hour and you're working more hours. Now, the advantage and the reason why I think this package pricing is attractive for a lot of professional organizers is you are able to sell easier a larger sum of money, like a chunk of money, quicker, right? Because you're saying, here, if you have a big project, you can just get option 3 or tier C or whatever that looks like. And here's the money. What the downside is, and that's a win for the client because they're like, okay, I know they're going to be here anyway, and I'm saving money by buying in bulk, right? Essentially. Why I don't like this for the professional organizer is you are working harder oftentimes or longer for less money. And so the incentive for you is at first it's exciting because you're getting this big chunk of money, but then while you're in it, you have to turn down maybe a smaller job or a better job because you're locked in and you're locked in at a lower rate. And I just don't think it's good business sense. The other reason why I don't like this particular discount is because you're locked into being on site for this particular amount of hours, right? If you're selling a package and let's say you sell a 15-hour package, right? Let's say you have that and you get done the project in 12 hours, then you either have to start something, like how are you making up that 3-hour deficit? Because if you're charging it by that amount and you're like, okay, I either need to slow it down and work slower so that I can fit this in, or I'm going to start something new, but I might not finish it. And so I think it's very restrictive because you're doing that. But my biggest issue with the package pricing is you're working harder and longer for less money. And I just think that is, as a business model, is flawed. I don't like that. Because for me, then I would rather on that model have a lot of little jobs. But I believe as a professional organizer, the way to make money is to have fewer jobs, but have them be longer in duration. But if you do that particular pricing model, you're not going to make money that way. So I hope that makes sense. Now, the third way, which I do, I now do a combination of 3 and 4, right? But the third option, which is really my tried and true method, and this is what I teach when I do my cohorts and I do one-on-one mentoring, is I teach session pricing. And essentially what a session pricing is, it's a little bit of a hybrid. So it takes the initial kind of hourly rate and it adds in a little bit of a buffer for offsite work. Now, not every job, every session is going to require offsite work, but I factor in how long do I want to be on site for an average job. And I know for myself, I find that 5 hours is my sweet spot, like 4 to 5 hours. But normally for me, like a 10 to 3 is like ideal time, right? That's when I like to be there. And for you, you could figure out whatever that sweet spot is for you. So I know that if I'm going to be on site for 5 hours and I know how much money I ideally would want to make, right? So let's just for math sake, I would want to make $100 an hour. So instead of charging $100 an hour, I would, and if I know I'm going to be on site for 5 hours, that would be $500. I would also factor in an hour for each session for some research, some returns, some donation drop-offs, whatever I have to do. So I figure there's going to be some other incidentals that are going to require some time. So that's going to be another hour. So now instead of charging $500 for the 5 hours on site, I'm charging $600 for the session. So the session, and I word it, and again, in my one-on-one mentoring, I give you guys all these templates so that you don't even have to come up with it on your own. But my phrasing in my proposals and in conversation with the clients is a session includes your on-site and off-site time, which includes, and I go through all the list of things that it includes. So I don't have to nickel and dime the client for the extra trips to the store or the extra time I'm spending researching on the computer or whatever it is that I'm doing. Now, the product cost is always going to be separate because every project's different and some jobs are very product heavy and other jobs aren't. So that's always going to remain out. But when it comes to being paid for my time, which is what people are paying me for, they're paying me for my time and my expertise. They're going to pay me for the session price. So I just have going off of this model of me wanting to make $100 an hour, I would then say a session is 5 hours in length and it's $600. Now they can do the reverse math and figure out what that comes out to be, whatever. Oh, you charge $125 an hour, whatever that looks like. But I would say, no, I don't charge by the hour. I charge by the session. So I'm not billing you for all these other little things. The other reason why I like the session pricing is when you charge somebody by the hour, going back to one of the kind of things that I think is a deterrent. If you're quoting a job and you go to somebody and let's say you say it could be any job, but let's just say it's a big job like a garage and you're like, okay, I think this is going to take 20 hours. People often underestimate, especially clients. If you're just starting out, you might not realize this, but if you're an established organizer, you know that clients will oftentimes underestimate, oh, this should only take 2 hours or 3 hours. When you know darn that this is going to take at least 10, 15, maybe even 20 hours to get it decluttered, cleaned out, sorted, organized, purged, put back together, all the things. So when you quote somebody a large number, I think this is going to be 20 hours, that can be very off-putting to a potential client because they're automatically feeling like shameful or defensive that, oh my God, I'm so messy or disorganized. And even if they don't necessarily consciously say that, it's just how they feel. And again, we want to make our clients feel good. We don't want to make them feel embarrassed or shamed or whatnot. So when you phrase it, you could take those same 20 hours and you say, you know what, I think that this project is probably going to be about 4 sessions. That is a much more palatable, digestible number for somebody to understand than thinking 20 hours. Because when you tell me something's 20 hours, I think, oh my gosh, like that's a really long time. But if I say, okay, I can do this in 4 sessions, it's essentially the same thing, but it just is marketed and positioned in a much more palatable way for your clients. So I like just the ease of saying for the client, you're getting the same amount of time. It's just delivered. The messaging is delivered differently. And again, I find that also if I'm not sure how long a job's going to take, what I wind up doing a lot, and this is something that I still do it to this day, even though I've done hundreds and hundreds of spaces of all different varieties. And I feel like I'm pretty good at estimating how long a project is going to take. I will oftentimes say, and this is also great for clients that you're just testing the waters working with and you're not sure how you're going to fit from a like a personality type. I would say, you know what? Let's start with 3 sessions. Let's start with 3 sessions and let's see how far we get. And that way you don't have to commit to how long, like I think it's, or I'm going to get this done in a certain amount because we don't have a crystal ball and we don't know again how emotionally attached the client's going to be, what other things you might uncover once you start doing the job. But if you just say, you know what, let's just start with 3 sessions and see how we go. That is something that gives the client like a peace of mind as well as you. And so oftentimes that is just the phrasing that I use to get started. And so that whenever somebody says to me, how do you charge? That is how I charge. Now, the other 4th way that I've been doing, and this is something I personally think is probably better for more seasoned organizers, just by the sheer fact that you have more practical experience under your belt of knowing how long certain jobs might take, what products you might be using. You have your systems really dialed in and refined. So that would be charging by the project, where you're doing a project price, right? So you look at the scope of a project and you just quote them a flat price. Now, the pro of that for the client is they know exactly what the budget is, right? You tell them what the project is. Now, again, we're not necessarily factoring the product. What are we putting? Because that could vary. But you're saying, here's what the projects cost. Now, you could also factor in product if you want. If you know exactly what you're going to be doing, you absolutely could factor that in. It takes a little bit more work on the front end to really measure, figure out. I don't like to factor in product at the beginning, especially before a decluttering job, because I don't know the exact volume of contents I'm going to need. So that might change, but you could do that. But what I will likely do is if I know with pretty much certainty that I'm going to do this job and it's going to take me like 5 sessions, and I think I have a couple different other moving parts, I might just quote them a flat fee for that. And that way I just know I have to get it done by that particular amount of time. And that way I can adjust my margins accordingly. But again, this is something that I would really reserve for people that have been doing this a while, that are very confident in their process. They're very confident in how quickly you can execute a job, try to account for all the other incidentals that may come up. But the advantage for you as an organizer is you can definitely have higher profit margins that way. The downside is if something goes sideways and you've already committed to this project price, then that might lower your profit margin or account for more time that you didn't necessarily account for at the beginning. So those are really the 4 different ways. Again, just to quickly run through them, you've got your hourly pricing, which is we just are accumulating time. We just run the hours as we go. We've got package pricing, which incentivizes the client, but is to get a discount based on the bulk hours that they get. So the more disorganized you are, the less you pay, is really in a nutshell. And the downside to that is you as a professional organizer are working for less money. So I never like that option. Third option, which is my preferred option, which is session pricing, which is you take your hourly rate, what you want to make hourly, you factor in how long you want to be on site for, so that helps you craft your schedule. You build in an extra hour and I do an hour, you could do 2 hours, but I like to do an hour for other incidentals. And that is your session price. So it includes on-site and off-site. And that way you can just chunk your sessions together. And then again, the fourth one is just do a project price where you look at the scope of a project, you factor it in. You can choose to factor in the cost of goods as well, or you could do that afterwards. But again, that is something that I wouldn't advise or recommend for somebody just starting out, because I think there's just too many variables and I don't want to see you I don't want to see you really underestimate a job. And I think for a lot of times is where people go at the very beginning, is they underestimate how long something's going to take. So there you have it. And again, if this is an area that you've struggled with, if this is an area where you need some help with how to communicate your pricing to clients, or you want to flush it through, this is exactly why I designed my coaching and mentoring programs. We've got a few different options out there for you. You could just go to our website, simply the letter B like boy, organize.com. And if you have any questions, you can always book a free discovery call with me, no charge, no pressure. And we could just talk about what your goals are and see if one of our offerings makes sense for you. And that's it. I hope this has been helpful for you guys. So remember, click the follow, subscribe button, and new content will be here next week for you. Until then, I'm Lori Palau. Peace out.